Hey guys, in this quick video tutorial I'm just going to demonstrate how to create this simple claw rig. We'll be using set-driven keys in order to animate multiple objects moving together with a single controller. Alright, so I'm going to start with this one object that I've combined into a single piece, and this is one of the fingers that we're going to use to animate, and I've got it currently in the world origins. I just want to move this back, so this will be positioned here somewhere. I've set it to the pivot point is set so it's exactly in the center, so we need to make sure that it rotates from around where we want it to rotate. If that's not the case, just tapping D lets you change that pivot point. So you don't want the pivot up here and you see it's rotating incorrectly. So the first thing we need to do is tap D, and I'm just going to snap to vertice with the snap setting, and if I middle click drag, this will snap to any vert, and I want to snap it just with the middle mouse there, and then tap D, so it's exactly in the center of this cylinder, which is going to give us a nice smooth realistic kind of rotation, like it's got an object to rotate around. Now if I jump into the front view, the other thing that's worth pointing out is I've set this up so that if I rotate at 20 degrees, that this plane here is completely vertical. So this will just help create a more realistic sort of grabbing of the object that this claw is grabbing. So you'll notice that, sorry, that was -20. You'll notice that I've got a bunch of settings in here in my channel box, and we don't want that. You need to position it where you want as the default pose. So I've done that here, but what you also need is everything in here to be 0. And I can't just type in 0 to zero that out, because then this will change its position. So what we do is come into modify, freeze transformations, and you can see everything gets zeroed out and this stays exactly where we want it. And because I've set this to rotate Z, if I just type in -20, 20, +20, that gives me this exact vertical space that I want. So I'll just undo that. So that's all working correctly. And now I've got a little bit of history on the object, so a little bit of modeling history and some of the transforms that I've done, so we want to get rid of that as well. So edit, delete all by type history, and so we've now got a nice clean object ready to go. I'm not concerned about the pivot not being in the exact center of the object, just as long as it's aligned so it rotates nicely. So what we're going to do is set up what's called a set-driven key. We'll use the NURB circle for this, and I'll just turn off my snapping. What I want, so this you'll see in the top view, this circle is exactly in the center, which is great. I might just drag this so that it's a bigger size, and I'll move it up just above the claw. And what I want to happen is, as I drag this one up, and we can see as I'm moving this up, the translate Y is changing, so this is obviously translate Y. So as I move the translate Y of this curve, I want the rotate Z of this object to change. So likewise, I've positioned this and scaled it to where I want, and I want to zero this out, so modify freeze transformations. And what I'm going to do is, in the animation menu, come into key, and we're using the set driven key system. So I click on set and it opens up this menu, and what we need to say is what's the driver and what's the driven. Well, the driver is this control, this NURB circle that I've made to be the controller. Before I start, I'm just going to delete its history, edit, delete all by type history, so it's a nice clean scene. And if I want to get a little bit more precise, what I could do is select all of these controls except for the up and down, which is translate Y. So control click translate Y. I can actually just lock all of these, so lock selected. It's good practice for rigging. So what that means is I don't have the option of changing other directions. All I can do is go up and down, which is nice. So this is the driver, so I'm going to say load driver, and this object, which also I only want to be able to animate in the rotate Z, so I'm actually going to lock everything except that rotate Z. Lock selected, and so with what I want to be the driven object, I click on load driven, and because I've locked all of those other keys, it's only showing me rotate Z. If you didn't lock it, it would show everything. This makes it a lot simpler to animate and also to set up this set driven key. So what I'm doing is firstly keying the start pose. Now we're not using the timeline here at all. It's all done within the set-driven key. And this is a node that's attached to the driven object. So as my sort of resting pose, my starting pose, I need to click these two attributes. So I'm saying for the controller, translate Y, and for the, what's the finger? It's called I'm calling this the finger, or the finger, the rotate Z, and I'm going to click key. And now I grab this controller and I'm dragging it up a little bit. And for this one, I'm rotating it, and I know that I've designed this to rotate 20 degrees, again, so that this is flat. And so now that I've moved this up and rotated this with everything selected, we can go key. And now, when I grab this and move it in the Y, we have this nice clean little animation. And so that's it for set-driven key. It's pretty straightforward really at a basic level like this. Now what I want to do is duplicate this object. Now I can't just go and hit Control D and then duplicate it. So when I do this, for one thing, I've locked the rotate Y, so I can't actually rotate it on the spot. I'm just going to Control Z that, so I've gotten rid of the other cube. If I were to do that, let's hypothetically, I'm going to unlock this, just to demonstrate a concept. If I Control D, duplicate this and rotate the second object, and we move this, we'll see only the one object has the animation. It has the set-driven key. The other object, the set-driven key, didn't come with the other object. So I'm just going to undo those steps. What I need to do is, instead of duplicating it this way, I need to use the duplicate special feature. So I'll open up the options. There it is. Open up the options for set duplicate special, and I'll just go edit reset settings. So this is your standard sort of default settings. Now one thing as well is, before I move forwards, I don't actually want to animate, I don't want to duplicate this object on its own. I actually need this inside to be a child of a group. So just in my viewport, with this object selected, I'm going to hit Control G, which creates a new group. And I can rename this if I want. I'll just call this something like that, finger 1 group. And inside there is my controller, my model. So the actual group itself, notice that the pivot point has automatically come in the center of the world, and nothing is locked. So this will make it a lot easier for me to make changes, like rotating it around, and it will also let me, the set-driven key will become local. So each object that I duplicate, because it's inside this group, will animate, all three objects will animate towards the center instead of all three going off in their own direction. So it's important that they're inside a group like this. Okay, so now that I've done that, I select the group, and this is the outliner in case you don't have that option open. It's just this button here to open up the outliner. And so we're using duplicate special options, and these have been reset just to show you the standard. We want this to be a copy, and I'm going to make it a new group. So we'll make a new group like finger 1, finger 2, finger 3 for each one I'm doing. And I'm not using these options at all. I'm using duplicate input connections. This one's important because this will take those set-driven key animations with the object. If I don't have this checked, it won't be animated. I want to make 2 more copies, so I'm making 3 fingers, and I'll hit duplicate special. And you can see that's created, it's put them in their own group because I had new group selected, but it's created finger 2, or finger 1 group 1, finger 1 group 2. And if I cared, I could rename this like so. So just to be clear, we'll call these fingers 1, 2, and 3. I might actually just select these, middle click, drag them out, just so they're not in that group. I don't actually need this group at all, just delete that. So we've got these 3 fingers now. And I'm not worried about the meshes inside them, we just work with the groups at this point. So with this finger, I'm going to rotate this one in by typing in 120. in the rotate Y, and for the finger 3, another 120, which is 240, and that gives me these directions, these 3 objects. And these should have carried over the set-driven keys. Let's test it. Yeah. And that's basically it. So now I've got this claw that can grasp and come together. And so it's just a matter of animating this controller. So basically I can sit here and say, I'll set a key at this point, and then at this point I want to, let's go 5 frames in and move it up and set a key. And so now it's animated when I drag the time slider, and maybe at this point I want to set another key, and then here we let go and set another key. And so we've got a animation doing this. And then finally, if I have all 4 of these objects, if I hit Control G to put them all under their own group, this will let me then animate the entire lot, and that animation still works regardless of what sort of angle we put it on. And that is how you set up and animate a claw with basic set-driven keys. Cheers.